Welcome to Truth by Billie Beene. Today's date, September 7, 2025, time in Texas, about 11 a.m. I have a subscribe button in the lower right corner of my screen. Thanks for like, subscribe, and share, and for hitting the like button. That helps my channel to grow. Some of the sources I'll use today: Forbes, Hal Turner, UFOMANIA Plus. Some of the things I'll cover: Atlas, President Trump, rules of engagement, and radioactive shrimp. So let's get started. So we have what's going on in space. I believe in the next 48 hours we might have a low-level G1, G2 geomagnetic storm produced by CME that came off the sun a few days ago. We also have the tropics, zero, nothing going on, and no development expected for the next 7 days. So we've got that going on. But we also have war on our doorstep. So let's talk about it. So we have this going on from Forbes. Jim Jordan, head of the House Judiciary Committee hearing, bringing out information that the UK and Europe are trying to censor free speech globally, especially in the United States, with the intent being to sway elections in the U.S. And we saw recently, in the past few days, the European Digital Group putting heavy billion-dollar fines on Google and other big tech companies, which President Trump said didn't appear to be believable. Their attempt by the European and UK digital groups is to control free speech, especially in America, and we see that being addressed in a congressional hearing. Way to go, Jim Jordan. And we have this. So we have, yes, Atlas. Okay. I said in my last video, we're hearing some weird stuff come out about Atlas. Now, Atlas, so we've got the sun, we've got Earth, and we have planets in our solar system, especially Mars, Jupiter, Venus. Atlas, it's called Atlas, I think 3I, and we have the U.S. government and other global governments still trying to convince its citizens that this is a comet. But what we can see with our own lying eyes is, according to the rules of astronomy, and I took an astronomy course in college in my Life Earth Science program, and always the definition of a comet has a tail facing away from the sun. That's the astronomy definition. Now, the U.S. government and other governments want to say that, oh, Atlas, it's just unusual, and it has, what they're saying is a tail facing toward the sun. As far as I know, with my little science background, that's really not possible. Why? Because the sun is always putting out solar wind. So from the sun, it would be blowing against it. You would not see a tail in front, facing toward the sun. That's one. So we have some notable independent thinkers. BPEARTHWATCH, another notable Christian physicist, Stan Deyo. We have Avi Loeb, astrophysicist, I believe, with Harvard. And now we have some U.S. government representatives, including Anna Paulina Luna, representative from Florida, getting involved with putting out accurate information to the American people. And some of the information we've seen coming out is it appears to be under intelligent control. And I will say that correlates to my past knowledge. And I give God the credit that also came from astronomers about interstellar objects being in our solar system in the past 10 to 20 years, appearing strongly to be under intelligent control. We have a history of that. Now, I will put this out, and I give God the credit for this. Any population, so we have a population. In the U.S., it's about 335 million people. I believe now we would say about 165 million, 165 million. I believe that out of any given population, approximately 50% of people literally do not engage in active, independent thought. Therefore, it makes them vulnerable to propaganda, of which certainly the U.S. government and other governments are experts, as well as the deep state. So I believe, I know I had that job assignment from God in 2020, get out there and tell my people truth. This Atlas object more and more appears to me to be some type of not a natural comet. And BPEARTHWATCH also put out that what NASA and NOAA were saying, that this object now has a tail facing toward the sun, which I've pointed out can't be. But BP puts out, he believed that was a distortion of extra filters being used, and that wasn't an accurate image. So that's that. Now, Avi Loeb and Anna Paulina Luna want President Trump to order satellites we have up in the sky near Jupiter. They want President Trump to order that those satellites be redirected to put those satellite eyes directly on the Atlas interstellar object. I would agree with that. Does this Atlas interstellar object pose a threat to Earth? For me, that is unknown. So we need to pray against this, but keep our eyes on it and keep an open mind. So that's going on. Yeah. And now we have this. And I'd like to say thank you to Leisha E. for additional support for my channel. From Fox News, BPEARTHWATCH, Beston Taylor, Stan Deyo, Avi Loeb, Anna Paulina Luna, all are in a group talking about Atlas and events. And they're also tying this to possibly a war effort going on, how that could impact us. And we know we have more and more set up for war. And I sincerely believe with the potential for war to be in the streets of America from the cartels, the CCP, Iran, and so on. So this is what we see. We see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 U.S. warships plus. We have other ships out there. We have thousands of sailors and Marines. Okay. So we have Cuba here, Puerto Rico. President Trump in the past 24 hours has put 10 F-35s in Puerto Rico to fight the cartels in Puerto Rico. President Trump has also ordered refuelers, troops, plus equipment and so on, back from Europe and back from the Middle East to America, where we need those equipment, planes, weapons, troops to defend the heartland. I believe that. President Trump, in a presser in the last 24 hours, publicly said and stated what his rules of engagement are with regard to Venezuela, putting F-16s over the Sea of the Caribbean Sea, where I believe the U.S. military has put into effect a military blockade. That's how I see it. President Trump said to the U.S. military, if these planes or anything else Venezuela does poses a threat to the U.S. military, you are authorized to shoot it down. You don't have to check back with me. You have that authority on the ground with the commanders on site. Rules of engagement. So that's going on. Yep. And it appears we will have this warlike activity going on. Venezuela, Colombia, Puerto Rico, Mexico. So that's going on. And other South American nations. I'd like to say thank you to Becky D for extra support of my channel. So that's going on. And we have this. Yeah. So we have no more tropic activity. Yeah. So BPEARTHWATCH put out about Atlas, about the tail, and he said he didn't believe that was a comet tail. And as I pointed out, it can't be facing the sun. And that it was a distortion of the image. Yeah. That's going on. But the U.S. government, NOAA, NASA, are continuing to make statements it's a comet. Now, Mr. Taylor brought this out, Ed Dames. He was, I believe he was initially trained by the U.S. military as a remote viewer. And he brought out information, I'd say, almost 10 years ago, about a future event from the sun called the kill shot. Now, we had a lady, Janet Napolitano, I believe she had been the head of Homeland Security, also about 10 years ago. As she was leaving office, giving a speech, also talking about a sun kill shot. Now for me, the sun kill shot is not in the future that I see coming. I believe that's an event you and I can pray against. But those warnings are out there. It'll be a sun event, hit Earth, affect Earth's gravity. Edgar Casey also had some information put out about that. Yes, I'm familiar with a lot of people, Nostradamus, Edgar Casey, Christian prophets, remote viewer. Yes, it's a possibility. But for me, as a Christian, I don't see that. I think we should pray against it. Now, we're seeing in Nevada something curious with earthquakes. In the past 24 to 36 hours, we've seen 33 earthquakes in Nevada. Magnitude 1 to 4, depth 5 to 11 kilometers or 3 to 7 miles. It's my opinion that I cannot tell. These are seismic events registering on seismometers, but I cannot tell if they are natural or man-made. But that's going on in Nevada. And Nevada had been the state where the U.S. tested nuclear weapons since the 1940s. Nevada had the highest incident of nuclear weapon test. We have this coming out from President Trump's Director of the FBI, Kash Patel. And we're seeing arrests are being made, and that we had the FBI plus other government agencies and law enforcement across many states, since President Trump was inaugurated, have rescued inside the United States 4,000 children who had been kidnapped and put into the trafficking channels. 4,000 children rescued, 1,600 arrested and charged with sex trafficking, kidnapping, and so forth. Since President Trump came in, we've had 19,000 illegals also associated with trafficking being arrested. Dan Bongino, he's number 2, a deputy FBI director, puts out that charges and a criminal trial have taken place, charging a Mr. Schema, formerly with the U.S. State Department, with espionage, selling classified documents to the CCP. He's been sentenced to 48 months in prison. And apparently, it's being put forth, he believed he was selling it to China. So it appears that might have been U.S. government, just following his actions. But he's been sentenced to 48 months in prison. Way to go, President Trump. Get the traitors out of the U.S. government. We have this from Times of India. President Trump is now ordering get out of the U.S. 270,000 Venezuelan nationals. Self-deport yourself. Because look, we've known, especially during the JB era, when our borders were virtually thrown open, And we saw terrorists of every flavor coming across our border, including military-age males from the CCP, the Iranian military, and so on, who are embedded in the U.S. So President Trump is now targeting certain groups to self-deport, or, we'll track you down, arrest you, and deport you. So that's going on. And we have this. Yeah, President Trump, rules of engagement, okay, to shoot down the Venezuelan planes if they pose a threat to the U.S. military. We have this from Judge Napolitano. I believe that was Friday. He interviewed Ray McGovern and Larry Johnson, talking about an executive order and rules of engagement. So that's going on. And we know President Trump put out an executive order this week renaming the Department of Defense to the Department of War. I consider that a big message. We have this from New York Prepper. President Trump is now looking at strike options by the U.S. military against the cartels outside and inside Venezuela. So that's going on. And we have this. Yeah, so President Trump sent the 10 F-35s to Puerto Rico, and he has put forth his rules of engagement. We have this from New York Prepper. Yeah, the alleged president of Venezuela, Maduro, which the U.S. government has not recognized as being the legitimate president of Venezuela since 2013. Maduro now is drafting 8 million Venezuelan citizens. So that's going on. And we have this. Through the eyes of ANIA K, a Polish journalist, talking about President Putin, President Xi. Oh, yeah. There was a recent meeting, and President Xi and President Putin were there, and they were walking down a red carpet path, and allegedly, and we have multiple sources on that, ANIA K, Polish journalist, also Joshua Philipp with Crossroads, about a hot mic conversation between President Putin and President Xi, talking about immortality. And we have this. Let me put this. Crossroads. And engaging in immortality, to be 150 years old by using organs transplanted, from other individuals. Now, I will say this. Since I became a news analyst in 2020, I have then became aware of diabolical evil existing on the earth, which I, the average human, could not have imagined. And I asked God, is this real? About the underground tunnels, trafficking, organ harvesting, consumption of the red life fluid from humans by deep staters, and so on. And yes, I did have verification from God. Personal experience. Some would call it remote viewing. I just call it a vision. Yeah, this stuff is real. And I found it curious that President Putin, President Xi, publicly, supposedly were caught in a hot mic incident when they were talking about immortality, living to be 150 years old with organ transplants. Now, I will put this forth. I do believe there is sex trafficking, there is trafficking for organs of humans all over the world, but that the deep state, especially elites, most likely engage in a situation similar as we saw depicted in the movie Island, and it was an island with individuals, and they would win some kind of contest and be going off of the island, supposedly to some paradise. It turns out this was a private corporation, and all these individuals on this island were clones of very rich and wealthy people. And when they allegedly were going to this paradise place, they were actually going for their organs to be harvested. Now, I submit the rich and famous most likely have something like that going on, a clone, their genetic clone, so that if they need an organ, it won't be rejected by their body because it's the same genetics. Now, it's my understanding of clones that they do not have reproductive genitals, so they don't reproduce. So when this hot mic conversation came out, which I believe was a planned release by the White Hats, talking about immortality and organs, yes, I believe it was to bring public attention to this situation going on. So, yeah, that's real, and it's real. Okay, we have this from Hal Turner. There's been a jamming of the GPS. So the GPS has been jammed in the Caribbean. GPS is down in the Caribbean. Now, Hal Turner makes a good point. You know, the U.S. military weapons, other military weapons do use satellites and GPS locating. However, there's a difference between civilian GPS and military GPS. Hal Turner points out it was the intel he received did not say which type of GPS was being blocked. I would submit likely it's the civilian GPS, which a nation would do if they're getting ready to shoot you. And we have this. We have, so the cartel had kidnapped Mexican border guards, but they were eventually released. It was 10 state Mexican border guards, cops, in the Mexican state Chihuahua. And they were released after being kidnapped by 80 Sinaloa cartel individuals. It was being put forth that these guards were stealing drugs. So that's going on. But the Mexican guards were released. Yeah. So that's happening. We have this from Steve Quayle, aggregate site Daily Mail, that the U.S. sank a cartel boat. We know that happened Tuesday. And then we find out on Thursday, we had 2 F-16s buzz the U.S. military. After that, President Trump put out his rules of engagement. Now we have this from Fox, talking about Republican Jason Smith. He's a representative from Missouri, talking about the CCP has groups, has organizations inside the U.S. for which the Communist part of the U.S. government has given the CCP organizations inside the U.S. tax-exempt status. So that's being questioned, and it's called the People's Forum, directly tied to the CCP and registered as an agent for the CCP. And yet, the Communist part of the U.S. government gave this group tax-exempt status. So we have Representative Jason Smith saying, what's up with this? We need to change this. So that's going on. The CCP is operating at many levels inside the U.S. And yes, there are traitors inside the U.S. government. We have this from UFOMANIA, talking about Senator Kennedy. He's a Republican from Louisiana. In a recent congressional hearing, Senator Kennedy likes to use props, especially movie clips, to make dramatic points. And he was saying that if you eat the radioactive shrimp from Walmart, you could turn into an alien, as we saw in the 1980s Alien movie starring Sigourney Weaver. He brings out a good point. I did a little more research on this initially when I heard that there was radioactive shrimp on the shelves at Walmart. I said, that can't be. And why? Because of my knowledge of how food is processed. I mean, you have all kinds of sensors on food. You definitely have detectors for radiation. The question in my mind was, how did this radioactive shrimp get on the shelves at Walmart? And now it comes out the radioactive shrimp came from Indonesia. And we saw in 2011, so we have Japan, Indonesia. In 2011, we saw in Japan, Fukushima. And that was a tsunami that hit a nuclear power plant in Japan. And yes, billions of tons of radioactive water went into the Pacific Ocean. Definitely could have flowed down to Indonesia and contaminated shrimp. I don't dispute that point. The big point, the big question in my mind is how it got on the shelves at Walmart. Do I believe that Walmart circumvents conventional food processing stages, including detecting radioactive material in food? No, I do not believe Walmart does that. Do I believe that Walmart could have been infiltrated with foreign nationals who circumvented Walmart's traditional method of getting food on the shelves and put radioactive shrimp on the shelves in Walmart stores? I can believe it. What should we consumers do? Well, hey, I think for a while I would not buy seafood from Walmart. And now it's coming out. UFOMANIA, Senator Kennedy, Republican, Louisiana, talking about the radioactive shrimp being contaminated with cesium-137. So I'll talk about this. Cesium-137. I've been watching a movie lately, Mile 22, excellent movie, Mark Wahlberg, talking about cesium-137, 139. I believe that the deep state puts out movies ahead of their actions that include a lot of truth. So we see the cesium-137 contaminating the shrimp that was eventually put on the shelves at Walmart. Now, we'll talk a little bit about what is cesium-137. So cesium-137 is a byproduct of uranium-235 that can be produced. The cesium-137 can be a byproduct produced by nuclear reactors, nuclear weapons, and we saw a lot of that coming out from Chernobyl. Chernobyl was 1986. So I'll show this to you. I believe that this is a clear and present danger, and I believe we need to be aware of it. So we had Chernobyl. We also had Fukushima. I believe that the contaminated shrimp most likely was the result of the contamination from the 2011 Fukushima event, Chernobyl. So we have here what happened in Chernobyl. We have Belarus. We have Ukraine. Right on the border of Belarus and Ukraine was a nuclear power plant, Chernobyl. I also highly recommend the DVD, Chernobyl. You can get it from HBO. It's an HBO product. You can get it from Amazon. Highly recommend it. So we had in 1986 Chernobyl a meltdown of a nuclear power plant to the point that it became equivalent to a nuclear bomb and is still continuing to produce a radioactive impact on its citizens. So Chernobyl happened 1986. One of the byproducts is cesium-137 with a half-life of 30 years. What does half-life mean? It means we have a glob of radioactive material. After so long, half of its potency goes away. That's called its half-life. So in 30 years, it's half as strong as it was 30 years before. Cesium-137 has a half-life of 30 years. And from the Chernobyl event, it contaminated air, soil, water. And now we're seeing, so that happened in 1986. So now in Belarus, we're seeing right here, Belarus, 2003. We saw a huge spike in childhood cancer linked directly to contamination of cesium-137 from the 1986 Chernobyl event. This is what cesium-137 can do and how long it can last. So that's going on. Yeah. So I'd like to say it's good, most likely, not to buy seafood from Walmart in the near future, I would say, and to pray for America, President Trump, the U.S. military, and world peace. I love you, and I'll see you soon.